In June 1978, a group of motorcyclists riding deep in the Plumas National Forest noticed a foul odor coming from a weathered Forest Service trailer. The door was locked, but one of the front windows had been smashed through. Inside, they found the body of 32-year-old Ted Weyer lying on a bed. He was wrapped from head to toe in 8 heavy wool sheets. He had lost nearly half his body weight, having slowly starved to death over the course of nearly 3 months. A fully functional propane heater sat in the room, untouched. Outside, in an adjacent shed, were enough sea rations and dehydrated meals to feed 5 men for an entire year. Weyer had endured freezing temperatures and slow starvation while surrounded by matches, fuel, and a massive stockpile of food. He had not arrived at the trailer alone. Weyer was part of the Gateway Gators, a basketball team for individuals with developmental disabilities. 4 of the men, Ted, Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, and Jack Hewitt, had mild intellectual disabilities. The 5th, Gary Mathias, was a military veteran with a history of schizophrenia. The group relied heavily on structured routines. They were so committed to their schedule that they had already laid out their uniforms for a Special Olympics tournament scheduled for the following morning, a game they were desperate to win because the prize was a week-long trip to Disneyland. On the night of February 24th, they drove 50 miles north to Chico to watch a college game. At 10 p.m., they were seen at a local market buying snacks for the ride home. It should have been a simple 1-hour drive directly south. Instead of following Highway 99 home, the car turned east. They drove 70 miles in the opposite direction, navigating into the steep, winding roads of the Sierra Nevada foothills. They continued to climb until they reached an elevation of 4,400 feet, crossing directly into the high-elevation snow line of the Plumas National Forest. The men were dressed only in light jackets, entirely unprepared for a mountain environment. By deviating so far from their route, they had moved beyond the geographic and psychological boundaries that kept them safe. 4 days after they vanished, a ranger found Jack Madruga's Mercury Montego parked on an unpaved logging road at the edge of a snowdrift. The car was in perfect working order. It had a quarter tank of fuel, and when investigators hot-wired the ignition, the engine started immediately. The rear wheels had spun in the snow, but the snowpack was only 5 inches deep. The vehicle was not high-centered or physically trapped. 5 men could have easily pushed the car back onto clear ground. Inside, the car was left unlocked. Maps were folded in the glove compartment, and empty snack wrappers were scattered across the seats. Despite the freezing temperatures, one of the windows had been rolled all the way down. The vehicle was a functional, mobile shelter. There was no mechanical reason to leave it, yet the group chose to walk away from the car and into the forest. Around midnight on the night they disappeared, a stranded motorist named Joseph Shans was sitting in his car nearby, suffering from a mild heart attack. He saw headlights pull up behind him and observed the silhouettes of several figures standing in the road. Shans screamed for help, but as soon as his voice hit the air, the figures stopped talking and their headlights were extinguished. Later, he saw flashlight beams moving through the trees, but when he called out again, the lights went out and the woods went silent. Some investigators suggest this was environmental delirium, that Shans's cries terrified the men, triggering a panic response. Others point to armed coercion, speculating a second hostile group in a pickup truck had followed the men up the mountain and was watching them in the dark. For a group dependent on routine, a disembodied scream in the pitch-black wilderness would have been a catastrophic cognitive overload. Whether the threat was real or perceived, it was enough to drive them away from the safety of their vehicle. When the snow finally melted in June, the remains of Madruga, Sterling, and Hewitt were found scattered along the mountain road and in the surrounding woods. All 3 had succumbed to exposure. The discovery shifted back to the Forest Service trailer, where the evidence suggested a struggle with the basic mechanics of survival. 12 cans of sea rations had been open military tool, but the massive pantry of dry goods remained completely untouched. On the trailer floor, investigators found Gary Mathias's tennis shoes. Ted Weyer's heavy leather boots were missing. The men who reached the trailer had found shelter, but they lacked the executive function to utilize it. Without a leader to sequence their actions, they could not translate the presence of a heater into warmth or a full pantry into a meal. Gary Mathias was the only member of the group without an intellectual disability, and he is the only one who remains completely unaccounted for. Family members later noted that the other men had been intimidated by Matthias. They hadn't wanted him to join them for the game in Chico, but they were too afraid to tell him no. Despite extensive searches through the Plumas National Forest, no physical trace of Matthias has ever been found. The men of the Yuba County Five died within reach of everything they needed to survive. They were feet away from heat, months of food, and a working vehicle. Yet in the darkness of the Plumas National Forest, they were unable to use any of it.